My name is Emily Carter, and I was 28 years old when I realized that silence can hurt more than words. The morning of my wedding began quietly, too quietly. Sunlight filtered through the thin white curtains of my small hotel room in Savannah, Georgia, painting soft lines across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and hairspray, and somewhere down the hall I could hear laughter not from my side but from another bride's room. A family gathered, a celebration alive. I sat on the edge of the bed in my robe, staring at my phone. No missed calls. No messages. No, we're on the way. I already knew what that meant. My family wasn't coming. I told myself I had prepared for this moment. I told myself I was strong enough. But when you grow up believing family is supposed to show up, even when they don't understand you, the absence still cuts deep. I wasn't always the outsider in my family, at least not in the beginning. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, the youngest of 3 children. My older brother, Mark, was the golden boy football captain, business major, my father's pride. My sister, Rachel, was polished and perfect, married by 24 to a man my parents adored. And then there was me. The dreamer. The artist. The one who never quite fit into their plans. By the time I was 19, my parents had already decided who I should be, what I should study, who I should date, and when I didn't follow the script, the disappointment turned cold. Not loud, just distant. When I met Daniel, everything changed, and that's when they pulled away completely. I met him on a rainy afternoon in a cafe near the riverfront. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream. He was polite but reserved, with calm eyes that looked like they had seen storms and survived them. We talked for hours, about books, about loss, about how sometimes life forces you to rebuild quietly. Daniel never bragged, never showed off. He dressed simply, spoke carefully, and listened more than he talked. That made my family suspicious. "What does he do exactly?" My mother asked the first time I mentioned him, her tone sharp. "He works in finance," I said honestly. "Like sales," my brother Mark smirked. Daniel didn't fit into their neat categories. He didn't chase attention. He didn't try to impress. And worst of all, he didn't ask for their approval. When Daniel proposed, it wasn't flashy. No crowd, no cameras, just a quiet walk by the water and a ring he said he'd picked after months of thinking about what suited me, not what looked impressive. I said yes without hesitation. My parents didn't. They didn't shout. They didn't argue. They simply said they wouldn't support the marriage, that they didn't recognize the life I was choosing. And when the wedding invitations went out, their RSVP came back blank. No regrets. No explanation. Just absence. So there I was, on my wedding day, surrounded by friends, and the family I was building, but missing the people who raised me. As my maid of honor helped me into my dress, I took one last look at my phone. Still nothing. I whispered to myself, I choose happiness anyway. I didn't know then that my family would soon regret every empty seat in that church. Because the reason they skipped my wedding was the same reason they would show up later, uninvited, apologetic, and desperate, when they finally learned who my husband really was. The church doors closed softly behind us. No dramatic music. No applause. Just quiet footsteps and warm sunlight as Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded, even though a part of me still ached, because when a bride walks down the aisle, she looks for familiar faces without realizing it, and every empty row reminds you who chose not to come. But Daniel didn't rush me. He didn't pretend it didn't matter. He simply stayed present, and that, I would later realize, was exactly who he was in every room he ever entered. Our honeymoon was simple. A coastal town in Maine, long walks, no social media posts, no showy photos, just peace. Meanwhile, back home, my family talked. Not about me. About him. He didn't even try to impress us. My mother told my sister Rachel over brunch one Sunday. "That's suspicious," Rachel replied. Anyone serious would have made more effort. Mark laughed, probably hiding something. Guys like that always are. They never once asked Daniel directly what he did, never Googled his name, never cared enough to know. They had already decided he was beneath their standards, and that was enough. Daniel never noticed, or if he did, he never said anything. 3 months after the wedding, something small happened. Daniel came home late one night, still in his coat, phone pressed to his ear. He paused when he saw me, lowered his voice, and said calmly, "Move the meeting to Monday. I'll approve it then." Approve it. The word lingered in the air. I didn't question him. Our relationship wasn't built on interrogation. But over time, little things added up. His calls always came from private numbers. He never discussed work details, only outcomes. He paid for things quietly, efficiently, without checking prices. Our bank account never seemed to worry. Still, he lived modestly. Same car, same clothes, same calm. One afternoon, my mother called unexpectedly. "I heard Daniel travels a lot," she said casually. "Sometimes," I replied. "To do what?" I paused. "Work." Silence. Then sharply, "Emily, we're worried. You married a man we don't know." That sentence stayed with me. Not didn't try to know. Not refuse to know. Just don't know. A few weeks later, my cousin Lily invited us to her engagement party in New York. I hesitated. My family would be there. Daniel smiled and said, "If you want to go, we'll go." The venue wasn't small. A rooftop overlooking the skyline, people in tailored suits, champagne trays, name-dropping conversations. Daniel wore a simple charcoal suit. No logo, no watch worth mentioning. My family barely acknowledged him. Until someone else did. A tall man approached Daniel mid-conversation, eyes widening slightly. "Daniel Hayes?" he asked. Daniel nodded politely. "Yes." The man extended his hand immediately. "I'm Jonathan Moore, CEO of Westbridge Capital. I didn't expect to see you here." Daniel shook his hand calmly. "It's my wife's cousin's party." Jonathan laughed nervously. "Well, if you ever want to revisit the merger discussion." Daniel smiled, gentle but firm. "Not tonight." The man nodded quickly and walked away. I turned to Daniel, confused. "You know him?" Daniel shrugged. "We've crossed paths." Behind us, my sister Rachel stood frozen. Mark's glass slipped slightly in his grip. My mother stared like she had just heard a foreign language. No one said anything. But the air changed. Later that night, as Daniel and I waited for our car, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Emily, who exactly did you marry?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, they had already decided who he was. And now, they were afraid they had been wrong. 2 days after Lily's engagement party, my mother called again. This time, her voice was different. Careful. Measured. As if every word had weight. "Emily," she said softly, "we've been talking." I already knew what that meant. Talking didn't mean apologizing. Talking meant reassessing value. "I did some research," she continued. "Daniel Hayes is connected to a few companies." Connected. That word again. "Yes," I replied calmly. There was a pause. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at Daniel across the room. He was reading, legs crossed, completely unaware that his name had just become a topic of emergency family discussion. "You never asked," I said. Silence. My father joined the call. He cleared his throat. "Emily, we think we may have misjudged him." May have. Not did. Not wrong. Just may have. They wanted to meet him. Officially. Daniel agreed without hesitation. Not because he needed their approval, but because he respected mine. We met at a quiet downtown restaurant. Private room, soft lighting, no spectacle. My parents arrived early. My sister Rachel and my brother Mark followed. This time, They stood when Daniel entered. That alone said everything. The conversation felt rehearsed. "How business these days?" my father asked, leaning forward. Daniel smiled politely. "Busy." "What exactly do you do?" Rachel asked, trying to sound casual. Daniel paused for half a second, just long enough to make everyone lean in. "I oversee long-term investment strategies," he said simply. "For who?" Mark pressed. Daniel met his eyes, calm, unthreatened. "For myself." That shut the table down. My mother recovered quickly. "Jonathan Morse spoke very highly of you," she said, too quickly. Daniel nodded. "He's competent." Competent. The word felt surgical. After dinner, as we stood to leave, my father placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We'd love for you to come by the house sometime." Daniel smiled. "Perhaps." Perhaps. Not yes. Not of course. Just perhaps. That night, my phone filled with messages. "Rachel, I had no idea Daniel was like that." "Mark, you should have told us." My mother, family should never be kept in the dark. But that wasn't the truth. They weren't in the dark. They had simply refused to look. A week later, Daniel was featured in a business article. Not flashy. No photo. Just his name listed under major private investors involved in a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure deal. My family saw it. That's when things changed completely. My mother sent flowers. My father invited us to dinner. Rachel asked about networking opportunities. They hadn't come to my wedding. But now, they wanted a seat at the table. Daniel watched all of it quietly. One night, as we sat on the balcony, city lights glowing below, I finally asked him, "Does it bother you?" He smiled softly. "That they judged me?" I nodded. "No," he said. "It bothers me that they didn't come for you." That was the moment I understood. Power doesn't raise its voice. It reveals character. And the next time my family showed up, it wasn't for love. It was for access. The dinner invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope. My mother's handwriting was deliberate, careful, as if presentation alone could rewrite history. "Formal family dinner," she'd written. "We'd love for Daniel to attend." No mention of the wedding they skipped. No apology. Just timing. Daniel didn't hesitate. "If you want to go, we'll go." That's when I realized something important. He wasn't testing them. I was. The house looked the same, polished, perfect, designed to impress people who already agreed with them. My family greeted Daniel like a guest of honor. My father poured his drink personally. My mother asked about his schedule. Rachel complimented his work, as if she understood it. I watched from my seat, quietly taking it all in. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "We're very proud of you, Daniel," he said, "and of the life you're building with Emily." Proud? Of him. Not of me. Then came the question. "Jonathan Moore mentioned an upcoming board position," my mother said lightly. "We were wondering if you might have influence." Daniel set his fork down gently. The room stilled. "I do," he said. Their faces brightened. "But I don't use it for people who appear only when the outcome benefits them." Silence fell heavy. My mother tried to recover. "We didn't mean it that way." "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "You did." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Mark stared at his plate. Daniel stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply turned to me. "Emily," he said, offering his hand, "are you ready?" I stood with him. That was the moment they understood. They hadn't lost access to him. They had lost me. At the door, my mother spoke, voice cracking. "We should have come to your wedding." I looked back at her. "Yes," I said softly, "you should have." The door closed behind us. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just, finally. That night, Daniel kissed my forehead and whispered, "You chose yourself." And I realized something. The man they rushed to greet was the same man who stood beside me when the room was empty. They skipped my wedding. They showed up when they heard who my husband was. But by then, the seat at our table was gone.